Do you think one mind is better than many? Neither do we. A University of Chicago Booth School of Business MBA is for curious and collaborative people who value different perspectives and ideas. Chicago Booth takes pride in empowering and being empowered by women of diverse backgrounds. We believe that fostering an inclusive community creates an environment of analytical, open-minded inquiry and produces knowledge with enduring impact. Learn more today at chicagobooth.edu/elevate. Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Ellevate podcast, History Makers. I am so excited for the episode that you guys have today. I just finished recording it. It's with Ruwa Romman. She is the first Muslim woman and first Palestinian American elected to the Georgia State House of Representatives. We talk about Georgia. We talk about redistricting. We talk about, politics in general and how to get into politics, either as a candidate or as a volunteer. We talk a lot about social media and how algorithms work and how misinformation can spread online. And just in general, it's such a great conversation. I had so much fun, and it was one of those that flew by. So let's go ahead and get to my conversation now. Hi, everybody. I have with me Ruwa Romman.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you today. I'm so excited, honestly, just to have somebody from Georgia, because I think Georgia is such a changing state right now. Yeah, just really stoked.
Totally. No, I mean, hey, Georgia, I feel like people tend to discount it, especially politically, and they think that we're a monolith. But there is a lot of really important and exciting stuff happening down here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always start out with the big question, which is, pretty broad, I know, but feel free to answer it however you like. How did you get to where you are today?
I laugh because it wasn't intentional. And the story that I've been able to kind of tell as an elevator pitch, because it can be a very long story, is I had wrapped up my master's and was working in DC when COVID hit. My husband and I had been living there for about a year and a half, 2 years at that point, and we knew we needed to move back because we're the oldest in our families, needed to be closer to family. And we had already planned on returning to Georgia within about 5 years, and we were already on year 3 at that point when we made this decision. And when we moved back, it was the height of the 2020 election, fall of 2020. And so I would basically do my day job, and then in the evenings and weekends would go do, canvassing, organizing, whatever people needed to kind of bridge those gaps. And so much of it was also virtual. So my friend and I started what was called the Volunteer Hub, because when the runoff happened, everybody wanted to come to Georgia. And so it was exciting. I've been doing political work since 2014, sometimes nonpartisan, sometimes partisan. And so this was just something that I did because I was really passionate about it, and I loved being on the back end. A friend of mine with the Georgia Muslim Voter Project had done a training with Vote Run Lead and asked me to attend it for those interested in running for office, because she knew I'd done this for a long time, wanted the feedback, and said, it's on Zoom, low lift. I said, sure. A reporter was there. This was, I would say fall of 2021. A reporter was there, and she asked if she can chat with me about the importance of minorities running for office and being in office. And I said, yes. And we chatted, and we had a really great conversation. And I'm pretty sure she even asked me if I was interested in running for office. And I said no, because I don't even know what district I'm in right now, because they had just redrawn the maps. And I really don't know how I feel about my name being on those flyers that I'm, leaving on people's doors. I really excelled in that back end sort of staff space with my colleagues. But then a few months later, the article came out. It was actually on my husband and I's anniversary. And it started with Ruwa Romman's contemplating a run for office, which is fair because we met at a training for candidates. But it really created a frenzy, particularly within my Muslim community and my organizing community. And so after trying to get out of it for a lot of reasons, the stars aligned. And 15 days later, we launched my campaign.
Holy cow. Can I just say, the head swivel that I did when you said that what the headline was? I was like, whoa.
It wasn't the headline. It was basically, I think, something along the lines of Muslim women become more politically engaged. But literally the first sentence of the article was my name running for office. And Yeah, it was a moment in time.
Can I just say, you are not even close to the first. Like, so many of the politicians that I have had that were history makers have said, like, somebody told them they should run for office, and they were like, I don't know about that, and then eventually did it. So, like, I hear that story echoed so much. They're like, I don't know about me.
Yeah, it's true because you don't. And I mean, you said it, right? Georgia does have so much diversity in it, but the reality is that Georgia's still a very conservative state, and I didn't know how people would respond to not just a Muslim woman, but a hijab wearing Muslim woman and a Palestinian at that. And I think a part of me was still scared because I'd worked for CARE Georgia in 2015, 2016. In fact, I helped start the chapter here. And CARE is, a Muslim civil rights group. This was like at the height of Trump's candidacy, and then, all the Muslim bans that came down. So my team and I had extensive, security practices, and we would get death threats. Local communities were getting death threats. I mean, it was a really scary time. And I'm married now, I have other responsibilities. I'm the oldest in my family. So a part of me really was worried about the safety element of it as well. But, thankfully it worked out and here we are.
Absolutely. I'm so glad it worked out. I always like to ask, especially our politicians, this, because I'm always so curious. What was election night like for you?
Yeah. So it's funny because I think election night was a little bit anticlimactic for us because when we started out this race, we didn't really know the district super well because it had literally just gotten redrawn. This district used to start where I live and go north. Now it starts where I live and goes south. And we had spent a lot of time door knocking, learning. I mean, every inch of this district. I don't think there's a part of it that we did not visit during the campaign in some way, shape, or form. And so the primary was actually really, really tough for that reason because we were both first time candidates, me and my opponent. And there was just like so many questions about is this road included in the district or not? And so my team and I very intentionally put a very wide net and we had no idea primary night what it would look like. So that was a terrifying night. Come election night, we had canvassed by that point over 15,000 doors. I mean, we had sent out so many text messages, so many emails, so many mailers. We kind of knew where we were headed. And, I did say we didn't get death threats, but my opponent leaned really hard into the she's a terrorist, she has ties to terrorism messaging. And at that point, the district knew me. They saw how hard we worked. They saw I was a policy analyst. They saw that I was a serious worker. They knew I wasn't in it for, funsies or the brand. They knew I really cared about what I was doing. And it royally backfired on him. And so, I think it was very jubilant. It was very exciting. I don't think we slept that night because we were just so stoked. We knew by about 9 p.m. because we went and got the tapes. But I remember, it was such a fun, low key night. It was my closest friends, my family, the people who canvassed for us, people who worked for us. And then and then my team and I got into a car once everyone left my house and went down to the Warnock party to see what was going on because at the time we didn't know it was going to a runoff. And so we wanted to see what was happening.
Oh my gosh. And you must have gotten enveloped into that. You want to talk about when Georgia blew up and everybody was paying attention to Georgia?
Twice now. I mean, we've had at this point 4 statewide races in 2 years because we did have the initial statewide in 2020 and then the runoff in 2021. And then similarly here, we had, unfortunately, this time they were both in 2022. And so to have all eyes on Georgia again was very intense, but that also came with resources. And I think that's one of the things that I'm personally trying to understand and work on moving forward is making sure that Georgia doesn't just become the next cash cow in this space, that people who come here really respect and love our state and want to make a difference for the better, for our institutions and our people.
Yeah. And you talked a bit about districts being redrawn. I think we have a lot of American listeners, but we also have a lot of international listeners. Do you want to kind of very briefly go over how that works? Because I think it's probably sounds insane to international listeners that, American politics, the district you represent can be redrawn like that?
Yes. So here in the United States, every 10 years, we do what's called the census, where we count every single person living in the United States, regardless of their immigration status, regardless of, anything. As long as they live here, they get counted. And then those numbers are used to determine the districts that we represent, because at the end of the day, it's all about proportional representation. So if one district grew by a ton and another district didn't grow by a lot, they tend to redraw those districts to balance them out so that the districts are the same size. This matters for both congressional representatives and House and Senate reps on a state level. And so every 10 years, once the new census comes out, people redraw the maps. Now, some states do an independent commission. Georgia's not one of those. Georgia is a partisan commission, which means that unfortunately, the ruling party does get to draw themselves an advantage. And so when I say that our maps were redrawn, I really do mean it. Even though the number of people is equal to the number of people in other House districts, the actual physical borders of that district is different.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think a lot of people, even in the United States, don't realize how much state politics is influenced by redistricting.
Exactly. So much of it. And sometimes what will happen is at the 5-year mark, there will be a mini redistricting. And what we've seen is they'll add in a random road or a random house because they want somebody who lives there to run.
Oh my God. Even I didn't even know that. Holy cow.
Yeah, it's fun.
So, I guess with all that being said, if you at home are looking to get into politics, into this crazy world that is politics, do you have any advice for anybody at home that wants to get into politics?
So much advice. First and foremost, thank you for even caring enough to consider that and make that a thought. What I always tell people is even though you don't care about politics, I guarantee you politics cares about you. Whether it's the cost of your mortgage or rent or taxes on yourself or your business, or even sometimes what you can and can't purchase or can and can't say, unfortunately, is where we are at right now. Politics does matter, and I sincerely hope that more and more people get involved in real life because we are in such an information heavy world that it has become frankly impossible to discern what is and isn't true. And you just have to kind of go straight to the source. Now, frankly, I don't think that any of us have a real understanding of politics if we are not somehow directly involved in it, just because of all the spin and social media and news spin, and just it's too much. And so, first and foremost, look up your local candidates. And the reason I say local is because those are the ones that tend to have the smallest margins of victory and where you can make the most difference. Truly, especially with city council and school board, and to some extent the state, state house and state senate races, somebody doing an extra shift for us a month can literally be the difference between us winning and us losing, right? That is a list of people that you're canvassing. That could be the margin of victory. If you can't canvass for whatever reason, you can phone bank for people. But at the end of the day, the best way I think to get involved is to find a really good candidate that does organizing really well and has volunteer opportunities and plug in with them and use that to then build a broader network. Now, if the question is, how do I run for office? Honestly, you're going to have to start the same way. You have to start by being involved in your community, doing something for your community, knowing what you're passionate about, and understanding your why, because this work can be so hard and it can be so draining. And it's so important that you come into it from a place of clear understanding of what you want to do and a really good support system.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about local politics because I was a poli sci minor in college. And the number of people that I've had to tell, because there's just this sense of, oh, I'm just one person, my vote doesn't matter. And I'm like, one, it does matter for federal elections. Like, I want to banish
It
that
matters
sentiment.
so much.
Yes, but especially it matters in local elections, state and local and district. It's so vital.
Yeah, and the example I always tell people is the Virginia state legislature stayed Republican for an extra 2 years because of a race that came down to the equivalent of a coin toss. I think they pulled names out of a box or something. That is not an exaggeration. Literally down to chance because, a few people said it's not worth me going to vote. And so I always tell people that I understand and appreciate that for a lot of people, it seems like the system is rigged. But the reason it feels that way and seems that way is because the people constantly in the hall talking to me there and present are, you know, most of the time corporate lobbyists, most of the time special interests. There are some advocacy organizations that are at the Capitol and they have been instrumental in helping us identify, you know, unclear bad parts of legislation because sometimes they'll sneak in bad pieces that you don't fully catch or sometimes very legalese that even I as a policy analyst have to go to an expert and say, is this saying what I think it's saying? But my favorite days at the Capitol were when people showed up and said, I want to meet with you. Here are the things that I care about. Here's why I care about it. And here's why I think you should too. Those are the conversations that I remember the most all the time. And they tend to break the information bubble that we're all in a very important way.
Absolutely. And I think that those are so important because while policy is vital, it's absolutely vital. Sometimes it's easy to get, kind of caught up in the daily grind of what needs to happen. And when you have those people come to you and go, "Hi, this is what I am worried about right now." Like that is so vital to know what your community is actually thinking about.
I love the way that you called it a daily grind because the system really does kind of try to force you on the same conveyor belt that it forces everybody else. And my team and I had to be very intentional about prioritizing, bringing people to the Capitol, talking to people. Because again, especially on a state level here in Georgia, the staff that I have, I had to fundraise for. We don't get paid staff. We get like an admin assistant for a suite that has 8 people in it. And that's the staff that we get given to us by the state. But I knew that because of all the organizing that we did, that we would kind of become a conduit for a lot of people that haven't had an opportunity to have their voices heard. And so I very intentionally spent a lot of time fundraising for that reason because I wanted to give people the opportunity to be a part of this process in every way possible. And so we planned town halls, not just after session, but during session. We, I think, hosted over 300 people because we would have like groups that say, we're interested in visiting. Can you help us make that happen? And we would meet with them and we'd show them around and everything else. And so that to me is one of probably the most important parts of my job is like, yes, I vote on legislation and I read legislation and I advocate for or against legislation. But just as importantly, I want to break open this space for as many people as humanly possible and change the way that we are doing things.
Yes. And has there been anything while you were either on the campaign trail or since you've been in the Georgia State House, has there been anything about your community that you've learned that has surprised you or that, you've really brought anew to the
Yeah,
House?
I think that people are not that it surprised me, but it was really nice to kind of see that I was kind of right about it, is that when you talk to people directly, it is so much harder for them to believe insane mis and disinformation online. And so I really think that we need to start moving from a space of online organizing is important, but it should be a tool. It should not replace what we are doing in real life because we are being manipulated by our algorithms. And I know that sounds like very like conspiracy spacey, whatever, but if you think about it, the way our algorithms work is if you interact with something, you're going to see more of that something, and you will never be exposed to something else unless your algorithm is one that tries to show you new things. But for the most part, these social media organizations want you to spend time on their platforms. They want you to click on things, they want you to interact with things. And so you end up in an information bubble and it becomes very difficult to fact check things. It becomes very difficult to kind of see outside of whatever the niche thing that you're on is. And a really silly example of this is my TikTok, right? I have to be very conscious of not clicking on too much Taylor Swift stuff on TikTok, or else my entire political thing is going to be Taylor Swift because I love Taylor Swift so much to the point that I've literally started a separate TikTok account just to scroll like Taylor Swift and other content that isn't political because it gets so quickly morphed into one thing on my feed and nothing else.
Okay, you're completely right because the way that my TikTok the past few days, if you had asked me, I would say, "Oh, the only thing anybody on TikTok is talking about is lyric changes in the Speak Now Taylor's
Yes.
version."
Which is so funny because
Yeah.
in my case, it wasn't the lyric changes. It was just the fact that like what does it mean in the music video that there's like a 1989 sign? So it's so funny that for you it's the lyrics and for me it's just Easter eggs.
Yeah, it's the most niche within the community. It's so funny. Like, I think I liked one video where like somebody was reacting to, they were like, oh, she changed the lyrics here. Now it's just, that's what you need to see forever.
Exactly. And, that's the scary part to me as well is when people first get on these social media platforms, the algorithm doesn't really know what to think about them. It'll try to discern some stuff from their IP addresses, but it's hard for them. And the chances of you getting sucked into some sort of like alt-right extremist um sort of propaganda loop is really high. And we see this a lot in places like YouTube and sometimes TikTok and now in particular Twitter, where you're one click away from like the next Nazi. And I wish that was an exaggeration, but it really isn't. There is a lot of people who openly claim themselves to be Nazis, white nationalists, whatever the case may be, and they're thriving on these platforms for a couple reasons. One, not because everybody agrees with them. Sometimes what they do is what's called rage farming, where they know that the more absurd things they say, the more likely you are to interact with it, to like, be mad about it, which is a good feeling. Like you should feel mad about it. If you don't, then maybe you should reassess your time online. But what I always tell people is, okay, it's a fine line between amplifying and raising awareness. And if you absolutely have to say something about this, screenshots are a great way to do that. Screenshot the post, record the video and then like upload it on your own. Don't give the main account extra traction because then what happens is the algorithm then pushes it out to more people, especially people that haven't seen that account. And so it then becomes a feedback loop and all of a sudden these people get like free advertisement and free clicks and I use the Taylor Swift example as a joke, but that was exactly how it works. But then here's how it works in a more nefarious situation.
Absolutely. No, and I have a very curated TikTok feed, though I've actually been taking a break from TikTok for the
Same.
past few days. And it's very, in line with my views. But if I so much as click on, how they have the recommended things, they're like, so and so called out, so and so controversy, like they'll recommend you click that. And then, of course, I want to click it.
Yep.
It'll then lead you to the most random thing in the entire world that has nothing to do with your For You page. And you're like, whoa,
Yep.
what on earth is this?
Yep.
So, like, even if you have, a carefully curated algorithm, you like it's just everything is on that platform, and you could fall down into a spiral, as I have many times before, where I was just like, "What is going on?"
Yeah. And that's why I think we use social media to kind of like turn off our brains and endlessly scroll. And unfortunately, we don't have that luxury anymore with an increasing algorithm centered experience. And I think, seeing threads is a really good example of that because you can't just see your followers right now and you can really see the algorithm working. I mean, I remember I was just kind of curious about it and just mentally tracking it. And when I first started, it was a lot of influencers and a lot of like paid content and whatever. And then the more people I followed, it was almost an immediate shift to politics, but that's not all that I wanted to see on threads, right? Sure, I wanted to see politics, but then I also wanted to see other people doing really cool things and what does that look like and because at the end of the day changing the world isn't just politics. I want to be clear here. I think it's a very important part. I've chosen to make it my priority, but I also recognize that organizing communities is just as important as anything else. And so I urge people to not just follow politicians but also follow people doing the work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of people doing the work, one somehow we've reached my last question, which I cannot believe. But my last question for all of our history makers, always, is we're always standing on the shoulders of people who've made history before us. So I always want to ask, who is a history maker or multiple history makers who have inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, there are literally so many. So I tend to opt for someone who's very local because they're literally in my life. But my friend Aisha Yakub, who's now the executive director of Asian American Advocacy Fund, actually ran in my district. It was the same number, just physically a different district, 2 cycles ago. Also a hijab wearing woman. She's Daisy. She's great. And I'll never forget watching her campaign because in that moment I realized just how much was possible for us in the state of Georgia. So in 2014, I worked on my first ever campaign volunteering for Michelle Nunn and Jason Carter as a college student. And I remember knocking doors and thinking, we can literally turn the state blue a door at a time. And I remember people kind of laughing me off. And then, a cycle later, or maybe it was 2 cycles later, she was running. And again, same thing. I would knock on people's doors and I expected people to kind of be mean or abrasive, particularly about her hijab. And don't get me wrong, we did run into those people, whether it was on my campaign or her campaign, it happened. But, at the time she started the Georgia Muslim Voter Project, she was doing all this work to engage our community. And it really inspired me to see that this work is long-term. Yes, you have short-term successes. Yes, you have short-term goals, but the infrastructure that she helped build, particularly for the Muslim community, is the reason that I personally think 4 Muslims are now in the state legislature here in Georgia. And I hope more people realize that. I hope more people realize that even though you might lose, and she did, she lost her election. It was a very close district at the time, and she lost by a very small margin. But even though she lost, she didn't take her ball and go home. She built something incredible, and she mobilized my community, and now she's mobilizing the broader Asian community. And so she continues to be one of those people that really inspires me.
I love, love, love that. And I love that it directly, somebody that people might not know about, directly influenced your campaign and helped you to reach your success. And it's like, it's all standing on the shoulders of people before us.
Yeah. And so I hope people who think that what they're doing isn't enough, or, the losses are really hard to swallow sometimes, but I really hope people understand that every little bit that we do is going to build into something so much bigger.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Ellevate Podcast History Makers. This has been amazing. Do you have anything else you want to say to our listeners before you go?
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for giving me this platform. If you are interested in following along, you can find us literally on every platform as Ruwa, the number 4 Georgia. So RUWA, the number 4, and then Georgia completely spelled out. Our website is the same, just add a .com after it. Follow along our journey. We are about to, like, as crazy as it sounds, start ramping up for next year because we can't fundraise during the session. So I'll be fundraising. We'll be collecting people's information to volunteer for us. So if you're interested, you'll find those forms on my website. You'll find them on my Twitter account, Instagram account. We're on Threads now. We're on Facebook. We're on TikTok. We try to reach people in as many places as possible. And so I hope more people follow along because we do try to make it fun. But I will say, fair warning, we do a lot of Taylor Swift themed content. I'm actually about to drop some in a little bit. So, take of that what you will.
See, that's a plus for me. That's just a bonus.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And I cannot wait for everybody to hear this.
Thank you. Seriously, this is awesome.
Ellevate Network drives real results for ambitious women trying to break through the glass ceiling and achieve success in their careers. We offer a platform full of resources and opportunities for growth, all designed to help you unlock your potential. With Ellevate support, you can take the first step toward achieving your professional goals. With a supportive community and tangible resources at your fingertips, you're only one step away from reaching your fullest potential. Join us today and take advantage of our 30-day free trial to start building the career of your dreams. Thanks so much for listening to the Ellevate podcast. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe, give us 5 stars, and share your review. You can learn all about Ellevate membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. Thanks so much, and join us next week.